Hello YouTube, Dave here again. A while ago I did an unboxing and review of the Madness at Gardmore Abbey box set that came out way back in the days of 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons. And one of the things that I really liked about it is that it actually had a copy of like the deck of many things built into it. And I just kind of got to thinking about some of the interesting products that could have come out along those lines when I remembered something that I honestly haven't really thought of in, well, probably about 6 or so years now at this point. And that was the fact that 4th edition D&D also released a sort of similar idea product for the Book of Vile Darkness. I know I have the 3rd edition copy of the Book of Vile Darkness that I did a video of before as well. And the Book of Vile Darkness was always sort of an interesting item because it's this evil artifact that is, used for plot devices and everything. This came out around the time that the third Dungeons and Dragons movie was released, which was all about the Book of Vile Darkness and had, the evil party and stuff like that. So it was just sort of, I guess, a little bit of a trip down memory lane, so to speak. I never got to use this, but I do remember thinking that it was a really, really interesting idea. And I thought it'd be fun just to sort of look through it here with you guys today, just for something to do. I had another video that I tried recording the night before I'm doing this, and it just turned out really horribly. I spent an hour and I just couldn't get the words right, and part of it's probably the fact that I'm having to do these sort of late at night now, just based off of things with like the isolation now. I don't really have the time during the day where it's just me in order to actually work on these videos. So I'm usually a little worn out by the time I finally get a chance to record these, but hopefully, that'll only be a little bit longer. But in the meantime, it gives me the opportunity to sort of revisit some of these things that have been sitting on my shelf for quite a while now that I haven't physically interacted with in years. So this is something that I'm just kind of looking forward to doing. So this was released as sort of, it's got a slipcover that you can sort of see that fits over everything. Has the design like the 4th edition rulebooks, and I've got to be honest, I like the design of like the spine and just the look of it. I kind of like this more than the 5th edition ones, mainly because they would use different colors for different products, and it just looked a little more visually appealing, I guess. That might just be me, but just the black spines feel kind of samey after a while, so it's just kind of nice to look at something a little bit different, and I think that this was a really cool design. So on the back, it says, "Devour it before it devours you. No artifact promises more power than the Book of Vile Darkness, but its pages contain secrets so evil that only the most corrupt souls can gaze upon them without being driven mad or destroyed utterly. Use this tome to add a touch of evil to your Dungeons & Dragons game, or character or campaign, or embrace the darkness and let evil dominate your game." The components, it includes a 96-page Dungeon Master's book with chapters describing evil villains and campaigns, a host of vile monsters, magic items, organizations, traps, hazards, terrain, diseases, and curses, and a short adventure featuring the Book of Vile Darkness artifact. And then there is a 32-page player's book featuring vile feats, character themes, paragon paths, and one epic destiny, which is back in the 4th edition days. It was designed with a 30-level system. So you had the heroic tier, which was levels 1 through 10. You had the paragon tier, which was 11 through 20. And then you had your epic tier, which was built into the game sort of from the beginning. So once you reached level 21, all the way from 21 to 30, you were into what was called your epic destiny. It also includes a double-sided map for use with the adventure inside of the DM's book. This came out back in 2011, so this was one of the later releases for 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, as they would cease publication of things dedicated to 4th edition in 2012, I think it was, around the time that they started the 5th edition playtest. And the retail price, which is kind of refreshing to look at, $29.95 US or $34 Canadian, so not too bad as far as the prices go. So we'll just take the slip cover off here. And we do have the double-sided map. I'm not going to unfold it here, but these are what the maps sort of give you. So you have these standing stones with the statue in the middle, and then you sort of have this elemental or chromatic, maybe not elemental, but like a chromatic pool there, swirl pattern. So cool looking maps. I actually really like the maps, and this scene here actually kind of ties in with the opening of the Book of Vile Darkness movie. Because there was like the priests of Palor that went to this like statue of their god to do some sort of ritual that didn't go too well for the main character, and then he went sort of all emo. But anyway, that's a whole other story for another time. But that's this basically what the maps look like there. And then we have our DM's book. So this is not the one with the like player options and stuff in it. This is the one for the Dungeon Masters, and it is also similarly designed like the rest of the slipcase, so that you could, if you wanted to, take the sleeve off and just have this on your shelf. So just sort of looking through it here. So the Vile Tome was the adventure, starts on page 80, but overall, just take a look at some of the old artwork from back then. Because I'll be honest, I always did like a lot of the artwork that we had in the 4th edition books. I just thought that they did, for the most part, a really good job. And some of the had like a more realistic style, whereas some things were more cartoony. Like that one's a little bit cartoony there, but it's still a cool scene with Osmodius and his troops. And this is giving you like campaign ideas, so. One of the campaign arcs is the War for Hell. So you can either be essentially working for the demons or devils, and sort of going through that, which is kind of interesting. And then we got Vile Encounters. So it gives you some information on sort of how to create them, some things to keep in mind, like the environment, consequences, vile terrain, so an agony amplifier. Agony amplifier typically covers the space of 3 squares on a side, so about a 15-foot area. Whenever a creature in that space takes damage, each other creature in the space takes 5 psychic damage per tier. So Heroic tier, it would be 5 damage. At Paragon tier, it would be 10, and at Epic tier, it would be 15. So it's not a ton, but it's still kind of interesting. And then it says, usage: an agony amplifier is most likely to be found in a Dark Priest temple or a wizard's lair. These circles are useful for convincing fiendish creatures to serve the binder that called them. They can also be used effectively by creatures that immobilize or restrain. Such creatures can lock down victims and then pile on the pain. So it's actually kind of interesting. Like I said, I haven't looked through this in quite some time, but just looking at, like, I could see wanting to put something like an agony amplifier, or like the Carnage Stone. So the Carnage Stone says, the effect: whenever a creature ends its turn on a square containing Carnage Stone, roll 1d6. On an odd number, the creature falls prone. On an even number, the creature must make a melee basic attack as a free action against a random adjacent creature. If there are no adjacent creatures, it takes 5 psychic. So that's something that I might incorporate, but I really like the idea of the agony amplifier. Then we have the Festering Corruption. So an area of Festering Corruption is usually no larger than 4 squares on a side, so like 20 by 20 foot square, or 20 by 20 foot area. Festering Corruption has 2 effects, one for the living and one for the undead. So whenever a living creature ends its turn in an area of Festering Corruption, it must make a saving throw. On a save, there's no effect. On a failed save, the creature takes 5 necrotic damage per tier and is slowed until the end of its next turn. And then whenever an undead creature enters or ends its turn in an area of Festering Corruption, gains a +2 bonus to attack rolls, and its speed within plus 2 to attack rolls and speed until it ends its next turn. So the +2 to speed would translate to like an extra 10 feet of movement. So again, I think that's kind of cool, and I could see wanting to incorporate some of these things. So I might have to take a closer look at some of these, just because it just seems like there's some really useful things, some really cool ideas that you can take from these older books, to sort of flesh out things now. Like again, having something like the what was it, the agony amplifier, having that in like an evil priest slayer, just seems like it'd be something that'd be really cool. Or a necromancer having the festering corruption, sort of like take up the area that they're in. So again, just kind of some neat ideas actually. It's been years since I've looked through this. Then we have some curses like lycanthropy, and was mummy rot in here? Because I think mummy rot was a curse. I don't see it in here, but there's just, again, just kind of some neat stuff. It's interesting, like I said, to go through this. This image I actually really like, because this, they have it listed as a crypt thing, but I've seen this in like an old 3rd edition book, and I want to say that that was the artwork that they used for the Hecuba, or Hucuba, however you want to pronounce it. And they were sort of priests that attempted a metamorphosis similar to how a lich achieves their form of immortality, but with the Hucubas or Hecubas, again, however you want to say that, it actually doesn't go properly. So they end up, essentially, they become undead, and they still retain like their spellcasting abilities and stuff like that, at least to a certain extent. But they're sort of like these creatures that are driven kind of insane from the failure of their experiment. So it's just kind of a cool thing, and I'm pretty sure that's where I saw the art for that, like back in 3rd edition, like 3.0. But still really interesting. The old rot grub pit. Villains and monsters. So it gives you some information, some guidelines are to use to create evil villains, including some abilities that you can give them, attack powers, just some different things to add flavor to them. Slave to the Nine Hells, that's sort of a theme. And again, just some really nice artwork. Like I said, I think that's one of the underrated things for me, was that there was a lot of really cool art in some of these books. So so here we get into actual creatures. So we have the fallen angels, some hordling demons, wrath devil. So the dragon spawn, Nagrul. I think this was the kind of dragon that was actually in, to bring it back to the Book of All Darkness movie again. I'm pretty sure that this was actually the type of dragon that was in there. And I always remember when I watched the movie, I never thought to really reference this. I think that it was probably well after this had come out that I finally had a chance to see the movie, and I only got a chance to see it by like looking it up on YouTube. But I always thought that they were trying to like fight this red dragon, and it always kind of annoyed me because it just did look nothing like the red dragon. But now that I think about it, unless my memory fails me, which it very well could, because it has been years since I saw the movie, but I think that this was the actual dragon that they ended up fighting in the movie. So. And then we have one of the greatest hag types of all. We have the old filth hag. And I think that's awesome because of my favorite band. So yeah, some cool creatures. And then we got some organizations here. The Dark Brotherhood, the Disciples of Nagrul, Chosen of the Sun. Chosen of the Sun, Rose in Narath's, Zealots. I'm just trying to see which ones they... I feel like this was the one... Chosen of the Sun adherents are self-appointed champions of good. They roam the countryside. Yeah, so I think Chosen of the Sun was the organization that the main character from the movie was actually trying to join, which makes sense that it would be in here. It's sort of the antithesis to essentially everything else that's probably going to be in here. And then we got dark rewards. So we get cursed items. Love me some cursed items. When used in moderation, they can be a ton of fun. Sinister items. Let's just look at the Bracers of Suffering. So the Shatterkai, which is sort of like the humanoids that are native to the Shadowfell, fight a constant battle against the ennui, defining their existence. Some go so far as to mutilate themselves so they can at least feel something. It kind of sounds almost like we're getting into Cenobite territory there. The Bracers of Suffering, called Egal Relan, helps focus the wearer's mind. Once fitted over the arm, the spines inside bite deep into the flesh. Your maximum hit points are reduced by 5, which makes sense, but you gain a +1 item bonus to saving throws against charm effects and effects that stun, daze, or dominate. So, interesting. And then we have the Vile Tome adventure itself. And I don't think I've ever read this adventure at all. I don't know if it's so much like an adventure as it is just a series of encounters that you sort of connect together. Because it's been a long time since I've actually looked at it. Oh, it mentions the movie right there, so that's kind of cool. It does have the Book of Vile Darkness in here as well. Trying to see what level range it was for. So I have to imagine that it's a higher level adventure. There's a short set of encounters that you can add to an ongoing campaign. Oh, okay. So, yeah. So the encounters will probably have, I would imagine, if not a set level range, it's one that you can sort of assume based off the encounters themselves. And I did like the way that they did artifacts in 4th edition as well, because with artifacts in 4E they had, you sort of had to do things like, the artifacts had this underlying intelligence to them. They had sort of a will of their own. They had goals and they had things that they were trying to achieve. So the player, if someone had one and they did things that were along the lines of what the artifact likes, then you would sort of create this stronger bond with it, and it would be more likely to, do things that are beneficial to you. Or if you acted against it and you did things that were like in defiance of what its goals were or what its mentality was, then you would sort of become almost cursed by it. And if you drop and it's based off a numerical score that you get, and if you drop it too low, then the artifact does something really bad and then disappears. And all artifacts had sort of this built-in mechanic where eventually they would move on, and so every artifact had like a moving on section. But I always thought it was just a really cool way to do it. So you had like the normal version, which had just the set abilities that you would see in the starting stat block. And I'm not going to go through them all here, but if it was like satisfied or pleased, you would gain more abilities on top of it. If it was unsatisfied, then you would start getting penalties, and if you angered it, it could be really bad. So I just thought that was a really cool way of doing things. So yeah, the encounters themselves do have levels associated with them. So the first one is for like 13th level characters. And I actually might take these encounters, I might incorporate this into a game, because I think it'd be kind of interesting. One of the things that is done in this first encounter is actually the potential for someone to become possessed, which is information that was in the first chapter of the book there. So just kind of again, I think there's some interesting ideas that can be used here. And then we have the Well of Many Worlds, which uses the prismatic sort of well thing, so that looks really cool. So that was the DM's book, and then we have the player's book, and this is what I really like about it, is that the player's book is designed to look like the Book of Vile Darkness. So similar to how Madness at Gardmore Abbey had the deck of many things, like an actual deck of cards that you could use as the artifact. If your players found the Book of Vile Darkness, then you could just give them this book. Like, this is meant to be the player's book, so this is what's filled with the player options and stuff like that. So I just think it's, again, a really cool touch, and it would just, make for a nice visual, I think, at your table. So again, some cool stuff there. Some information on playing evil characters, which I think is always good to have, because I feel like most evil games that I've been a part of always ended up boiling down to, well, I can do whatever I want because I'm evil, even if that means that they do really stupid stuff that gets everyone killed, which happened more than once. So yeah, which is one of the reasons why I think evil campaigns were sort of hard to pull off, but it's not impossible. And so this gives you some, just some advice for, oh, I guess that's not a, okay. It gives you some advice for how to make and play those characters. So again, just some cool information to have there. And then just some different information based off of the different types of characters you can make. So ones that are martially inclined, arcane, divine, primal, which is sort of like the more nature-themed ones. And then we have character themes. So the first one that we have is cultist. And your themes give you a little bit of background, but they also give you a slight bonus to certain skills. So there we have the cultists, as well as some special features that they can get as they level up. It's kind of like archetypes in things like Pathfinder 2nd Edition. That's really cool. And then they have the Reaver, which reminds me of Firefly. The Vile Scholar. Again, I think that's kind of a cool artwork there. And then we have the Blood-Crazed Berserker. Blood-crazed action. Your bloodlust drives you to the brink of madness. Barely do you find self-control not to butcher everyone around you. Ugh. That kind of flies in the face of what I just said earlier. When you dig deep and push beyond your normal limits, your hatred breaks free and sends you careening into the next foe. So when you spend an action point to use an attack action, your charge gains an +2 power bonus to attack rolls and a +4 bonus to damage rolls until the end of your next turn. So it is meant to be used in a combat situation. Unstoppable Killer gives you +2 bonus to saving throws against being dazed, dominated, immobilized, restrained, or stunned. And then Mutilating Strike. It is a reaction, it looks like. So the trigger is you hit an enemy with a basic attack using your weapon, and it takes an extra weapon die and is dazed until the end of your next turn. Contract Killer, Demonologist, which would be, sounds like it would be kind of a fun one to try out as well. A little Quasit familiar there. The Vermin Lord, which was in the movie as well. One of the characters was the Vermin Lord. Exemplar of Evil is the Epic Destiny. And then we got some feats. And that's basically it. So that's what we have there. But again, it's just sort of a neat little, the way that they packaged it, I think, was one of the things that I really liked about it. It's hard to compare it to the 3rd edition Book of Vile Darkness. But I kind of thought that this one was the one that I'd be more likely to really use in my games. And I love the idea of having like the actual replica of the book itself that you can use as a prop in your games. So I just think that that's a really nice touch there. It does include some adventure elements that you can pepper into an existing campaign, and honestly there are some aspects of it that I really want to actually read through this again and try to incorporate some of the elements into like an actual like 5th edition D&D game, because a lot of it would be kind of easy to do. You just, for the things that the damage depends on the tier, you just sort of set the damage yourself based off where the player's levels are. But I think it would work really well, and I think it's got some interesting things that can kind of spice up your campaign. So I look forward to implementing some of these things, like the agony amplifier and things like that. I just think it's such a cool idea. So that's my look at the 4th edition Book of Vile Darkness. And yeah, so again, some cool stuff in here, and I think that it's one of those sort of overlooked elements from the previous edition, but it just makes for a really just again I love the product overall, and looking through it now, I feel kind of bad that it's been so many years since I really spent any time with this. But I'm gonna remedy that, I think, in the days to come. So anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and let me know in the comments below, have you used the Book of Vile Darkness in any of your campaigns? And if you have, how did that go? What was the premise behind you getting it? Or let me know what you thought of the movie if you saw it, because it was something. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Take care.